Fantastic, thank you. I'll just wait for the slides to come up. So just to introduce myself while the slides are coming up, as Linda said, Professor Mary Bishop, I'm a director at the Royal Society of Medicine. My background is I'm an accountant, and I've worked in education and tech for most of my career. So starting in the Hewlett-Packard laboratories, where I was commercial lead for the European funded projects, and then moving into universities and professional bodies where, for example, I've been a dean of the university and director of learning at ACCA, which is the world's biggest professional body. And I now have a portfolio of 2 days a week director leading all the innovation at Royal Society of Medicine. And then alongside that, I have some national regulatory roles and advising and some non-executive director positions. So we've now got the slides up. So I don't know if we can move the people bit across, whether that's possible.
We could minimise it,
Fantastic.
during the talk of it.
Thank you, thank you.
You'll just have to click back onto your slide as well. Because it's not the active window anymore.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll try it.
okay. So,
Stephen, grab that little talking bar and put it up down to the bottom.
There we go.
all right, it's working. So the aim of this is really to talk about a project that I set up in January of 2023, and over the following 6 months went through the process of identifying an EdTech partner and then designing and launching a new EdTech product, which is designed for the healthcare market. So I'll talk about the features of the product that we developed. I wanted an immersive technology product that drew on AR and VR and was AI empowered and was also working with avatars. I wanted something really different. And I'll talk about why. It's called Navigating Angry Conversations, and the design methodology and the pedagogical approach is something that I'll address as I go through, if I can. Is it better if I use the... Yeah, okay, let's see if that's... So where's the...
Down at the bottom, just under where the talking vision.
So I'm really sorry, but I can't see how to...
No, it seems to be working.
Okay, so but you pressed something then, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so if I press those, yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. So just to give you a little bit of context, the Royal Society of Medicine is a membership body. It's all about health education. It's got about 20,000 members, the majority in the UK, but it does have about 10 to 15% international. We go right the way through from student through to consultant. We've got very eminent members and very eminent speakers. It's a long tradition being a place where the most senior clinicians and researchers have convened and worked on all the different innovations. So most medical innovations that you think of from the last couple of centuries, there will be a little bit of history somewhere in there that refers to the Royal Society of Medicine. So, for example, the very first conversations about test tube babies were actually in discussions at the Royal Society of Medicine. So the Royal Society of Medicine, until I was part of it, they weren't really digital in their journey. In 2019, everything was fully in person. They didn't deliver anything digitally. During COVID, of course, as many institutions, they had to pivot and to go online. They did so through Zoom and they did so through Microsoft Teams, but nothing else. And then just coming out of that in very early 2022, I was approached to see if I would work with them on the digital transformation, as well as the transformation of how they ran their education, library, archives, and also heritage assets, tremendous historical importance. both nationally and internationally. So the vision is better healthcare for better lives. So I'm not going to dwell on these drivers of change. We're all working with them. They underpin what we do, they overarch, and they're threaded through the speed of digitalisation, internationalisation, which is just beginning now, changes in governance and regulatory focus, quite a lot tighter in many respects than it used to be, and far more transparent and understood. And that offers opportunity, but also prevent problems to be solved. And then market expectations. When people are learning, as we all know in this room, they have expectations, and those expectations have really gone up, I would say. I think one of the things that has happened since COVID is that we've moved away from people not wanting to try digital to actually having been forced to try digital, they're actually embracing it far more. So I think there is a move forward significantly. I see that in the years during and since COVID, have much further I've been able to move forward with my work in terms of conversation to try and convince people to come with me. So much easier now, I would say, than it was, prior to COVID. That the speed of the change there, and the market expectations, I think, are really at customer service level now. So people expect tech to work. So what did I need to do for the Royal Society of Medicine? Well, as I say, they've not really done anything digitally. They've had a tremendous following during the COVID years because of the fact that they were convening the world-class experts on a weekly basis in the seminal COVID series, which I've subsequently curated as part of the archive. But again, Zoom and Microsoft Teams, nothing further. So what should I do? Should I look at bringing them up to speed with virtual learning environment? Is it a content management system? Or do I just say, well, that's part of the journey and we'll move that along, but actually let's make the market stop and look at us. In other words, find what I would call a hero product, something that is different, that will make everybody look at the Royal Society of Medicine and think, actually, whilst we don't think of it in the digital world, it's now at the cutting edge of what we're doing. And so that's what I decided to do. And I wanted a practical solution to a real market problem. So, we're always finding solutions to things that aren't really market-wide problems. So I wanted to know that what I was doing was actually going to be delivering, that it was a tech project that walked the walk. I didn't want tech issues. I wanted to be able to scale up, and I had very limited investment, which probably everybody in this room is familiar with having to deal with in education. So identifying the issue that I should explore was really the next question. I did market research with our 20,000 members. I'd already decided that I was anecdotally getting feedback that professional development and communications were a growing problem in healthcare, and that they were being squeezed out in terms of training, because obviously, technically, I'm sure we all want the surgical training to be at the top of the tree, as it were, in terms of prioritisation. But actually, the way we communicate is often at the bottom of prioritisation. But because of that, the actual patient outcomes can be affected. So I was getting that message loud and clear from our members. I was doing market research and horizon scanning. Here, I've got something from the Medical Protection Society. In the next slide, I can show this is the Guardian last year, and actually that should say 2024. That's a typo on my part. So this is an ongoing and growing problem. We were getting kind of the big picture message: 1 in 50 patients we treat are abusive. And we wanted to tackle that to protect the healthcare practitioner and ensure that they weren't getting stressed by it, that they weren't disrupted and not able to deliver because of it. But we also wanted to not lose sight of the need to protect and improve patient outcomes by ensuring the very best communications. So the need to develop professional communications, this is traditionally, I would say, how it's been developed before. So either a fairly solid e-learning module or clinical placement that many people would say is the gold standard. And then in the middle of that, some standardized patient behavior that is used for role play. All of those have real benefits. The gold-plated clinical placement is more and more squeezed because of workload pressures, because it's hard to get time to be released from work to go and study. The role play and standardized patients, great to do that, but it can actually be quite intimidating for trainees because they're being filmed and then their videos are being analysed. And then the e-learning, not really interactive enough. I did when I was Director of Learning at the ACCA, I developed with Pearson VUE and with other providers, we developed some really innovative e-learning and we embedded engagement. But even then, with really significant resources, the tech didn't allow us to get underneath the real question of engagement. So I wanted to improve communication skills for those reasons, as I say. And I've just mentioned some of the limitations of a standardised patient approach. And I think what we're getting back more and more in terms of commentary was there's not enough time to practice. We're being put into the real life situation, dealing with patient anger and patient supporter anger for whatever reason. And is it really anger or is it presenting as anger when actually it's fear or it's frustration? And we want to be able to deal with it. We want to do so in a space that we feel is safe. We don't necessarily want to be filmed, for example, and we want to focus on communication as a primary objective, when very often in this sort of training it becomes a secondary objective and the focus is more on the medical treatment. If we could solve it, then we felt we could offer impact in both the direct cost savings in terms of training, because you've got repetitive training for the same cost, indirect costs, and also make a really positive impact on patient safety because their communications would be opened up, which would allow the health practitioner to help in more appropriate ways or the best way that they could. So I wasn't sure where to go in terms of which partner to work with, and I looked at quite a few, and I landed with Body Swaps. Body Swaps is a specialist in professional communication skills using avatars, and it has a USP whereby, as we often do, I think in many products, we choose an avatar and we role play through that avatar. The real USP with Body Swaps is having done that, having been recorded doing that, then you actually have it played back to you and you are a fly on the wall on the receiving end of your professional communications. So a unique way of using technology. So as I've put here, and I won't go through it, but it is groundbreaking. It is. I've seen one other provider that's working at that cutting edge with avatars, but not in such a responsive way. I think it will become so that it's part of everything we do all the time. I think it will become a hygiene factor, but you know, we're a good way away from that now. But even in the 6 months that we've had the module, the tech has moved on significantly and we can do much more with it. I wanted to boost learning on programs by, first of all, engagement, but secondly, reach. I wanted to make sure that you didn't have to have VR headsets. Obviously, it's the full app version. It's wonderful if you do, but you could stream it. You could actually be on the bus if you want to, and you could have it on your phone. I wanted it bite-sized, I wanted it flexible, and you could dip in and out, competence-based, multiple practice. So this is what Body Swap's kind of setup is in terms of their focus on practice, on swapping bodies so that you can watch yourself perform. And I think that allows really deep reflection and underpins one of the Body Swap's values, which is also a value that I work with as an educator, which is empathy. So it's based on empathy and reflection. I wanted, as I say, to be able to scale, and I also wanted to be able to measure, and we've got really good analytics in Body Swaps. So it's individual analytics, we can call them up as educators to see them at the macro level as well. So if I move on to show you what it looks like, these are the avatars. This here is the avatar, or one of the avatars of the medic. You get a choice. This is actually an angry patient supporter, a husband of a young woman who has had her tests lost. She's had tests. She's really worried that they may be going to reveal something sinister and they've been lost. And it's months and months now. So we don't just drop our learner into the situation, we go through that. So we start here with allowing the learner, and this is the view, some of you may have tried the VR glasses in the main room. Is it the Macmillan Hall it's called? They're still there, so if after seeing this you want to try out, then please feel free to do so. But this is the view through the glasses. So we start off with observation and some analysis and also some techniques. So box breathing, for example, if you're in a situation that's really stressful, what can you do about it? How can you put yourself to one side, as it were, of somebody's anger that is being directed to you and not respond to that anger, but feel you are in control of that situation? So there is some theoretical and there is some technique in there. We then move on into conversation, one-to-one listening, and you are the responder in your avatar that you've chosen. So you choose A, B, C, whatever you feel is the most appropriate response, but those responses are in that format. So it's a multiple choice to give you confidence so that you can then get feedback on what you would choose as the most appropriate to you response, and get feedback from the learning. And then we move on from that, having built confidence, where you actually use your own voice. So you are faced with some very difficult things being said to you. There are comments in there that are could be interpreted as threatening, could be interpreted as sexist and racist. How are you going to deal with them? How are you going to diffuse that anger and putting everybody in the room back to what they're there for, which is medical diagnosis, medical intervention, and supporting the very best patient outcome that we can. So then, having done that, you've been filmed, you've had AI-driven feedback all the way through. And for example, if you're on VR headsets, that includes body language. So what's your eye contact like? What's your use of hands like when you're speaking? If you're not using VR glasses, then you get everything but that. So through streaming, you would get your tone of voice, how loud you are. You still get the connection through eye contact, for example. So once you've had that, and that's been filmed, you swap into the patient body and you receive your own advice. You hear your own voice. And that word that you thought sounded really sympathetic when you said it, on the receiving end, you think, oh my goodness, you know, that actually was not the right word to use or the right thing to say, or something is said like, I understand how you feel. And that can be a red flag to somebody who is really upset. Because, you know, obviously you can't understand how they feel. You can empathise with it. So you're taught through the module how to change your language so that what you're doing all the time is diffusing the situation. So you're getting back to where you should be. And then you've got detailed analysis and you've got a digital notebook. So all of your performance analysis feedback is automatically recorded for you. It's competence-based, so you can do it multiple times. So you can see your progress as you go through. Yeah, I now need to. So here we've got results, and I'm sorry it's moving around, but it's because it's filmed from somebody on a headset. So they are moving their head around, but you can see, for example, eye contact. It'll give you some detailed analysis. You can go into it more deeply than that as well. And where you're not doing so well, then there are tips for how you can improve. Here. So just an overview of the module, introduction and self-reflection. We've got a medical expert, is Professor Dame Leslie Fallowfield, who's an expert in this area and has for many, many years delivered in-person training with actors. So is eminent in her field for having delivered that. When I first approached her to see if she'd work with me to work with me as my medical expert, she was not keen. She didn't think that working with avatars could actually give the outcomes that she could achieve with actors. She's now, I would say, not a complete convert, but she recognises that actually this is a really good tool and certainly advocates for it. We've also had interest a lot from the media. So, for example, Computer World, because what we're doing, although it's professional communication development in healthcare, it's actually something that is being looked at across the board. As I said at the beginning, I'm an accountant, and I sit on the board of CIPA, for example, which is Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accounting, and we're looking at it there as well. So something like this, although this is in a medical setting, and this was directed specifically for trainees, we're finding that consultants use it. We had a gathering of GPs and all of their staff, and they used it for their GP reception, and the receptionist said it was fantastic. That dealing with anger was their life, and this is what they needed. We never thought of that as the intended audience, but the audience is wider and broader than we had expected. So this is the sort of results that you can see when you go into your work field. So it analyses, were you respectful? Did you offer an apology? Offering an apology, whether you've got your fingers crossed behind your back or not, is the way to diffuse anger in many situations. So did you offer an apology? Did you recognise somebody's situation? Did you empathise? And I come back to that word empathise, and do you reflect on that empathy? Did you say something that could be interpreted as being judgmental? And did you name and validate the emotion? So did you say, you know, I recognise your anger, I acknowledge where you are. So those sorts of techniques, using that sort of language, we are finding is making a real impact in the health practitioners. So this is just a summary really of what I said. As I said, we wanted complete reach, and that means that it's got to be platform agnostic. So it's not just on VR glasses, it's on all VR glasses that you can access it. So if you're a gamer and you've got VR glasses, because you're a gamer, then you can download it through that, and you can get the full fat version with the hand controls through that. And those are the most accessible VR glasses as well, and the prices obviously are coming down all the time. You can stream onto your PC, you can stream onto your laptop, it goes to Mac as well, and you can also take it to your iPhone, your Android phone. So we achieved that. It's mode agnostic, and it offers therefore that accessibility. I was particularly mindful because I've worked a lot with Africa, and I struggled sometimes with internet connection when I'm really doing outreach work in Africa, whereas mobile phones are better, and I did a lot of work around that at the ACCA, so I drew on that here to make sure that we could reach everybody. Some stats, we've got loads of stats, but some of the stats: identified areas to improve skills, that's 83% of people, that's 333 sessions, and there can be quite a number of people in each session, and 86% recommending. Oh, sorry, I went too quickly there. So I've also commissioned some independent research, which I'm overseeing, where 2 minutes, okay. I've got some scholars who are independently looking at immersive learning to see about the effectiveness of this type of learning. So even though I commissioned it and I co-designed it, I want to make sure that it's the best that it can be, and I want somebody other than me and other than Body Swaps to evaluate it. So that's ongoing at the moment. In terms of learnings, I think I've already mentioned this applies across the board to professional development of skills. One thing I would say is, if you are going to develop something like this or use something like this, don't try and solve everything with it. just look at your problem, make sure your problem is narrowly and specifically defined, and solve that problem. You know, when somebody comes in and says, oh, that form is brilliant, can you just add in? Or that course sounds great, could you just add on another couple of sessions? And what you'll do is then dilute the power of what you're doing. And sometimes it works, most times it doesn't. So I was very focused on, let's look at anger, let's focus on anger. I was very focused on my target market of trainees, although that's proved actually just to be a starting point. I was focused on it being short, flexible, bite-sized, mode agnostic, and I wanted it to be accessible to people to integrate into qualifications and to credentialise if they wanted to. So I'm just going to jump forward to this slide, because what I do want to say is AI, generative AI, all the different techs that we've got access to now, so much more cheaply than we had before, and in so many more integrated ways. I just always say to people, just pause and think, is that the right way of doing it? Because we are people at the end of the day. So I'm looking at two ends of the spectrum here. Do we want people in a room using tech, or do we want people to be sharing? And I go back to your first presentation there, where sharing was fundamental to it. I think it has to be to everything that we do with tech. So this is a tool. It's not the answer. It may be the answer to some problems. And I think I've talked about all of that. And my final slide is, so what next? And I always, if anybody's heard me speak before, tend to end with a quote. And I like this quote from John Dewey, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I mean, he died in early 1950s, and it could be written yesterday, couldn't it? If we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. And I think it's so important to remember that, and not just to use tech in answering those questions, but to draw together tech and knowledge answers. So hopefully that was to time, Linda.
Thank you.